Good morning. My name is Scott Douglas. I'm here at Cowpens National Battlefield on the anniversary of the battle, January 17th, the original battle being fought in 1781. And today I'm dressed as a soldier of the 7th Regiment of Foot, the Royal Fusiliers. There were 174 men of this unit, most of the battalion itself present with Tarleton's forces here in 1781. They had actually left encampments around Winnsboro, South Carolina, and Camden, been on the march for about a week towards 96 when Tarleton asked for them to be added to his force that was chasing Daniel Morgan's column. By the time they get here to the battle, these men have been on the march for about 2.5 weeks in the middle of winter, going through some pretty harsh conditions. Along the way, while the Army does have wagons to carry some tents, which they're sometimes able to set up at night, and some extra food provisions and ammunition, most of the soldiers' equipment has to be carried by the soldier himself. And so today I've actually got all the equipment laid out here that a soldier of the Royal Fusiliers would have carried on his back in January of 1781. Everything, all the soldier's necessaries, his clothing, his cleaning equipment is carried in a knapsack. And I have a knapsack on my right over here that's all done up for the march. It's basically a big double-sided envelope that's folded in half. The two pockets that are inside contain all of your clothing, and then you can wrap a wool blanket, strap it to the top of the shoulder straps to carry everything on your back. The knapsack is painted with a linseed oil-based paint just to make it somewhat water resistant. Inside the pack, the soldier is going to carry, as I mentioned, some extra clothing. These men are on campaign wearing long trousers like I'm wearing here, a garment developed for combat in North America and used by men of both armies. It's actually combines trousers and spatterdashes that cover the top of the shoes. They keep stones and other debris from getting into the low quarter shoes themselves. Under these, the men are going to wear woolen socks, and so I actually have a spare pair of socks right here. But for when the men are in a more stationary situation, if they're on more formal guard duty, they still retain more traditional European-style military clothing. And so I actually have a pair of white wool breeches that would end at my knee. As it's winter time, I have a pair of long gaiters or spatterdashes or leggings as they might be called, just to give the same effect as the trousers that I'm wearing, keep debris out of your shoes, keep the lower half of your legs warm. There's a pair of garters made of leather, which when wearing the leggings would buckle around the knee just to hold them up. With the breeches, you would have a long pair of stockings, so I have a pair of those to wear. The men are carrying at least 2 shirts, including the one that's on their back, so I have a spare linen shirt here as well. And the whole Army in this winter campaign is issued with other gear to keep them a little bit warmer. The men are actually receiving mittens, sometimes knit, sometimes made out of just pieces of cloth, similar to the trousers that I'm wearing. The hat that I'm wearing is the one that they would wear on duty, a cocked hat, kind of the mark of a British soldier at the time. But for fatigue purposes, if I was digging a trench, if I was cutting firewood, and if I want to sleep warmer at night, I have a fatigue cap just made out of last year's regimental coat, done up with a unit mark on the front. But this front piece can actually be let down as a sun visor. You have a flap in the back that can be let down to cover your ears, a very practical cap to wear in the middle of winter. Besides clothing, we need equipment to maintain our weapons and our leather gear itself. So a soldier is going to be issued a set of brushes and balls. You would typically have a clothing brush, which I don't have mine today, as you can tell by my ratty uniform. But I also have a brush for polishing my shoes. Not just my shoes, also my ammunition pouch, anything made out of blackened leather that we want to keep supple. We want to keep the leather from rotting and falling apart, and help keep it waterproof. So you would use the brush to apply what was called black ball. It's a combination, there's different recipes, but mainly it's tallow, sometimes beeswax, and lamp black and it's kind of like modern shoe polish. You would apply it ideally every day or two, and it would help preserve your leather items. For your white buff leather equipment straps, you have white ball, basically the same thing, but made out of pipe clay, just to give the white sheen to the straps of the cartridge pouch and the bayonet belt. And those are the equipment that we need for the firelock itself to use your musket. The soldier would wear a cartridge pouch over his left shoulder, and inside, in the case of the 7th, they had pouches with 29 holes drilled into a wooden block. Each hole would be able to receive one pre-made paper cartridge that would have enough gunpowder for one shot, already measured, a lead musket ball, and based on archaeology here, potentially even multiple buckshot that the British are firing at the Americans to give a spread of projectiles. Inside of your pouch, you would carry equipment to clean your musket. You have a turn screw, basically a screwdriver of different sizes to disassemble the screws on the weapon. You have a worm that goes onto the end of the ramrod once the barrel is flushed with hot water to release any fouling after firing. You can use this to run cloth or tow patches down there to dry it out. To polish the metal, the men are being issued brick dust, just crushed up, rasped bits of old brick that you would apply on a cloth with oil, and it works kind of like fine grade sandpaper today. In lieu of this, they could use ash from the fire to polish their metal equipment and keep it from rusting. With the musket, you need a bayonet. This would be worn on a waist belt that, as a nod to campaign conditions, they're actually wearing over their shoulder. It's less restrictive than wearing a belt around your waist. And so the bayonet itself comes into play when you're in combat, fixing to the end of the muzzle, turning the gun into a big spear. Beyond all this equipment, of course, the soldier needs to eat every day, and we have to carry at least 2 days of provisions on our persons before the wagons get a chance to resupply us. There's limited foraging available in this countryside. It's the middle of winter. There's not a lot growing in the fields. There aren't many people whose homesteads these armies are passing. So while they're able to get a few root vegetables here or there, mostly these men are relying on being issued with flour or cornmeal and then salted pork for the most part. To carry all of your food, you have a linen bag called a haversack. And again, it's just a linen sack big enough to hold a couple days worth of provisions. You might provide yourself with a wooden spoon, maybe a bowl, although we know that the men in a mess, half a dozen soldiers who would cook together using a large tin kettle, sometimes just ate straight out of the kettle, sitting with it in the middle of a circle of the men. You might have a cup, ideally a tin cup, for drinking purposes, and then to carry water with you, a tin water bottle or canteen holding about a quart was issued to these troops. With all this, you might have a few personal items, something to make the days go by a little bit easier. Smoking is very common for soldiers in the 18th century. We find at archaeological sites everywhere fragments of broken clay tobacco pipes. And to start your pipe or to start a fire, you'll of course need at least somebody in your group of soldiers in your mess to carry a flint and steel so they can get sparks to start their fire. All of this equipment together with a couple days worth of food, with a full issue of ammunition, you're probably looking at a good 40 pounds, maybe 50 pounds of equipment that these men are carrying every day on the march, going as fast as they can, 15, 20 miles a day, to catch up with Dan Morgan here at the Battle of Cowpens.